Samuel did not accept impending doom as an excuse for Saul to run ahead and do the offering himself, just to get it over with.
Welcome to Mission 66, your daily journey through God's Word, powered by Bible teacher Dr. Luis Sayao and Transworld Radio. Today, we're in 1 Samuel, a book that emphasizes the importance of obedience, faith, and trusting God's plan over human ambition. Download your free study guide at mission66.org to follow along. Now, here's Esther Sisulu and our teacher, John Matthews.
We are thrilled to join you for today's chapter-by-chapter look through the book of 1 Samuel, found in the Old Testament. Now, we've come to chapters 12 and 13, where Saul, the son of Kish, has been anointed as Israel's first king. Now, he started out very well. He was humble, and when the Spirit of God got a hold of him, he turned into a real fireball, commanding the Israelite army to rescue the town of Jabesh from the Ammonites. But, of course, some imperfections start to show in his shiny exterior, and our teacher, John Matthews, will then present the theme, the transition.
Esther, thank you so much, and a very warm welcome to Mission 66. Wherever you join us from today, it is so good to be with you. Now, as many of us will know, saying goodbye is very often a sad moment. And today we reach the end of the life and the ministry of a great man of God. And I'm talking about Samuel, who was the last judge of Israel. And we're going to see that Samuel has something to say at the end of his journey. And the words of Samuel express a reflection of his ministry, of everything that he's done, on the experience that Israel had had throughout history. And the Bible here says that Samuel said to all Israel, I have listened to everything you said to me and have set a king over you. Now you have a king as your leader. As for me, I am old and grey, and my sons are here with you. I have been your leader from my youth until this day. Here I stand. Testify against me in the presence of the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I have done any of these things, I will make it right. You have not cheated or oppressed us, they replied. You have not taken anything from anyone's hand. Samuel said to them, the Lord is witness against you, and also his anointed is witness this day, that you have not found anything in my hand. He is witness, they said. Then Samuel said to the people, it is the Lord who appointed Moses and Aaron and brought your ancestors up out of Egypt. Now then, stand here, because I am going to confront you with evidence before the Lord as to all the righteous acts performed by the Lord for you and your ancestors. And so Samuel is retiring here with clean hands. He says, look, everyone, know that I've tried my best to do what was right, to have the right attitude in everything I've done, never taking advantage of any situation. And the people of Israel then sign under that, agreeing with him, having seen this extraordinary example of leadership that was Samuel's life. This example, as we see, is praised in the Bible. And then he takes a look back at the past, at the history of the people, just seeing how kind and good God was to them throughout history, and how so many times, ever since the time of Moses, the people had strayed from God and sinned against him. And so there is this list of elements in history beginning in verse 6, and they continue through to verse 15, where Samuel says, but if you do not obey the Lord, and if you rebel against his commands, his hand will be against you, as it was against your ancestors. Samuel is saying, look, your history is not a very good one, so pay attention to the way that you're going to act from now on. And Samuel continues his speech here, saying something else as well, saying, look, after everything that God has done in favour of you, you still had the courage to add to your pile of sins by asking for a king. Despite Samuel telling them what they had done in verse 17, and moving on to the end of the chapter, Samuel gives one last word to the people, and he says this: do not be afraid. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. Do not turn away after useless idols. They can do you no good, nor can they rescue you, because they are useless. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people, because the Lord was pleased. Look at this. Look how beautiful this is. The Lord was pleased to make you his own. The same goes for you and I today. As for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by failing to pray for you. And I will teach you the way that is good and right. But be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things he has done for you. Yet, if you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will perish. Samuel ends his ministry by bringing these words of warning and hope to the people. Look, he says, be careful, pay attention, turn back to the Lord, because that's the only way that blessings are coming your way, the only way that you will experience peace and tranquility in the future. And then chapter 13 continues, telling us that Saul was 30 years old when he began ruling as the first king of Israel, and he ruled a total of 42 years. And what happens here is that Saul is in a time of conflict with the Philistines. Remember, the Philistines were a mighty, a very powerful nation who presented real problems for Israel ever since the start of the monarchy. And so there's been this long, ongoing battle, this dispute for territory with the Philistines. And Saul then chooses 3,000 men from Israel. 2,000 were with him at Michmash in the hill country of Bethel, and 1,000 were with his son Jonathan at Gibeah in Benjamin. And with this army, they go out to battle against the Philistines. And Jonathan attacks the Philistines in Gibeah, but the Philistines, they find out about that. Then Saul, it says, had the trumpet blown throughout the land and said, let the Hebrews hear. So all Israel heard the news that Saul has attacked the Philistine outpost. And the trumpet was sounded, and now the Philistines attack the Israelite army because they have such great hatred for them. And the Bible says that they became obnoxious to the Philistines. So the men were called to gather with Saul in Gilgal. And it says the Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. It was a huge army. And it says they went up and they camped at Michmash, east of Beth Aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard pressed, they hid in caves and thickets among the rocks, in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. So the situation, as you can see, is getting pretty complex here. This terrible battle is taking place. What is going to happen next? Well, the Bible says that Saul remained in Gilgal and the soldiers were extremely frightened. It says they were quaking with fear. And the chapter says that Saul waited 7 days, the time set by Samuel. And Samuel was supposed to arrive in Gilgal, but he didn't. And then the soldiers begin to scatter. So what does Saul do? Well, he starts giving the orders and says, Bring me the burnt offering and the fellowship offerings. And so Saul offered up the burnt offering. And just as he finished making the offering, Samuel arrives. And Saul goes out to greet him. What is Saul doing? He is the king who had just taken up his position. He's not the priest. He's not Samuel. He has no right to do what he has just done. But he decides to take his position as a priest. Doesn't even realize what the words holy or sacred mean. So in his impatience, he doesn't bother waiting for Samuel. And then Samuel arrives and asks this ominous question, "What have you done?" And Saul replied, "Well, when I saw that the men were scattering and that you did not come at the set time and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favour. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." Samuel said, "You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." Then Samuel left Gilgal and went up to Gibeah in Benjamin, and Saul counted the men who were with him, and they numbered about 600. Well, up to this point, let's see the real negative reality that is taking over Saul's life is coming into view. He is the man chosen to be king based on characteristics that had pleased the people. We read that he was a tall man, he was a good-looking guy, but he's somebody who lacks what is needed to be a truly good leader. He had lost humility. He had grown proud. Power had begun to corrupt his heart and his soul. The roar of the crowd, the adulation, the constantly being placed on a pedestal would prove to be his destruction. And we see how he does not understand the meaning of holy and sacred. He doesn't understand what his role is and what his role isn't. He's hasty. He doesn't seek God before doing things. He simply acts on impulse and so does something foolish, feeling obliged to present burnt offerings. And what strikes our attention at this moment is that he says, "I've sinned." And he asks for forgiveness. He turns back to God. His interpretation, though, of reality is ultimately based simply on his circumstances, on his experience and his personal impulse, without paying any attention to God, to his commandments, to that which he presents as guidance. And so what is the result? Well, the result is that everything begins to go wrong. And God will say, "Saul, your turn for goodbye is coming."
Thank you so much, dear friends, for joining us for today's Mission 66. A really fascinating study here that we're going through in the book of 1 Samuel. Well, I'm Esther, your host. And hey, John, I know you've mentioned this, but please do tell me again, what did Saul do that was so wrong? I mean, this seems to be a mistake that anyone could have made if they were under similar pressure. I mean, I can imagine having made the same mistake. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely right. Me too. Well, look, underneath it all, again, God sees the state of a person's heart. And what can we discern? Well, Saul's mistake shows a lack of discernment. He acts with a degree of impulsivity. Of course, we all do at times, and sometimes often. humanly speaking, of course, we would forgive Saul because after all, the Philistines are bearing down on him. He wants God's blessing, so he hurries the process along, does the sacrifice himself. But the real problem, I think, here is that he usurps the role of the priest. So he's acting without seeking God, and he has been given clear instructions to wait until Samuel gets there. So in effect, he runs ahead of God, and that reveals a trend in the way that Saul behaved and a trend in the way that his character, essentially, in terms of, right, I'm taking control of this, I'm going to sort this out. And how often do we do, as you alluded to in your question there, Esther, do exactly the same thing? And I wonder, in our modern world, which is rush, get things done, then move on to the next thing to get things done, how often we're missing out on God's leading and God's guidance and God's timing.
Yeah. A question I find very many people would ask, especially in relation to God's sovereignty, looking at this case, would be, well, why would God have appointed Saul knowing ahead of time that he was going to make this mistake, right? Why didn't he just choose someone else from the very start, or at least prevent Saul from offering the sacrifice?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we don't really know the answer to why God chose Saul. That's the bottom line. But we do know that God allows us to make our own decisions, perform our own actions, come what may. And again, here we see God allowing free will, not just free will in theory, but free will in action. And God allows things to play out in real time. This goes for the good things that we might do as well as the bad.
Do you think that Saul should have been punished so drastically right off the bat at the very beginning? I mean, we've seen instances of God forgiving. God is a forgiving God. I mean, did he mess up so badly that he was just automatically disqualified?
Yeah, that's another good question, Esther. From a human standpoint, we often judge sins differently than God judges because we can't see the state of somebody's heart, really. We can give a good go at guessing by evidence, but we don't really know. And so we may assume that, sins like murder are great sins. But actually, God considers pride to be at the rotting centre of so much destruction in our world and in our hearts and in our lives, and responsible pride for so much damage in our world. Mankind doing things their own way without a look to God. Well, that is disastrous for our world as well as for the soul of the individual. And so when we apply that to this situation, when Saul disrespects the sacred, given this incredible role that, in God's eyes is such an important role, and so he disrespects the sacred and doesn't give proper honor to God and doesn't wait for Samuel, tries to act as a priest out of desperation because time is running short, or so it seems. He commits this sin out of pride and impatience, and it turns out to be far more serious in God's eyes than perhaps we first get when we read this passage first time out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the deeper we read into the story, the more we see the severity of what Saul did. So, now we see in chapter 12 that Samuel retired, for lack of a better term, but then he reappears again in chapter 13. John, why was it so important that he be the one to offer the sacrifice?
Well, Esther, here we are. Remember, we're transitioning from the period of the judges to the period where the kings were going to rule. And Saul does become king here, but let's put it this way. The spiritual strength of his reign comes from Samuel. And even though Samuel is officially retired, he retains his prophetic authority. And so he's a wealth of knowledge, and Saul looks to Samuel for wisdom, and things get tough. And when they do get tough, it's Saul consulting Samuel for help. And we're going to see that more as this story develops.
So something that really struck my attention here, John, in chapter 13, it says that there were no blacksmiths in Israel. So that means that the Philistines didn't permit them or wouldn't permit them to have anything to do with metal making. So I guess that we can deduce from that Israel had no weapons.
Yeah, that's exactly what it means, Esther. And the Philistines had control over Israel to the extent that they're able to keep Israel from having any blacksmiths, lest they make any weapons to threaten the Philistines, let alone overthrow them. And we see in the next episode, actually, that there were only 2 swords in the entire army. Can you imagine that? 2? And then we get a sense of how much trouble Israel is in. And it explains why Saul was under such pressure to quickly get the sacrifice done so that God would rescue them soon.
I mean, humanly speaking, I think it does make sense. But of course, we need to really look at God's way and what he wanted here. So obviously, just moving forward with this, Israel at some point got weapons because their history shows them defeating their enemies and conquering over their enemies.
Yeah, they did get hold of weaponry, and we're going to see how, actually, when we get to 2 Samuel, and that tells the life of David. And there Saul begins to lose his mind out of jealousy that David would replace him as king, and so he tries to kill David. And during that time, well, David had to run for his life, and so he defects over to the Philistines, saying, look, Saul's my enemy as well. Maybe I can help you. And the Philistines accept him. And it's during this period that David learns how the Philistines got iron out of iron ore, and they can fashion that iron into weapons. And once David had learned that technology, he was then able to return to Israel with the know-how, with the knowledge that they needed to build up their own army and weaponry.
Look, this is still going to get good. I cannot wait for our future episodes. But right now, let's just take a moment to summarize what we've learned in these chapters in 1 Samuel.
Yeah, let's do that. Well, the theme, Esther, today was transition as we witness the farewell address which Samuel gave upon his transferring the leadership of the nation of Israel over to a king, from a judge to a king, from Samuel to Saul. But then we also see how Saul gets impatient when he sees the Philistines coming. And he also believes that Samuel is late for the sacrifice and the blessing on the army. And Saul knew better than to usurp the office of the priest, but that is what Samuel represented. Samuel, he did not accept impending doom as an excuse for Saul to run ahead and do the offering himself just to get it done and dusted, to get it over with. And we see later that Saul would go on to commit similar sins, which show us that he only served God when it suited him. When it wasn't convenient, well, he turned quickly to human reasoning, the occult even, and relying upon himself. And that self-reliance is as dangerous today as it was then. And then that self-reliance would cost Saul not only his kingdom, but his life.
Well, friends, you do not want to miss out on our future episodes of Mission 66 as we continue to take a further look into the book of 1 Samuel. And of course, this is the account of Israel's King Saul. We look forward to joining you next time. From me, Esther, and the team, saying this is Mission 66.
Let me remind you to head on over to mission66.org to download your study guide. It's free. Dive deeper into the Bible teaching of John Matthews and learn how it all relates to your Christian walk. Tag along with John and Esther on our Bible road trip episode by episode. Your study guide's waiting for you at mission66.org. That's where you can also post your questions or make a comment, and even help out with a donation to keep Mission 66's heart beating around the world. Hop on over to mission66.org. Mission 66 is a partnership of TWR and the ministry of Dr. Luis Sayao.